Just before we get into the draft picks in this mock offseason, I just want to recap the picks that we actually do have from our own draft picks, plus the Jimmy Garoppolo trade to Indianapolis in this mock. So in the second round, we have the 61st overall pick. In the third round, we actually have three picks now: 73rd overall, 82 overall, and 93 overall. Round 4, pick 133 overall. Round 5, 172. Round 6, 186. Round 7, we have three picks. That's 253, 256, and 263. Those are a combination of compensatory picks, whether it's from coaches, whether it's from players leaving, and then also the Jimmy Garoppolo trade to the Colts. So let's get into the picks now. In the second round, 61 overall, our first pick in this 2022 NFL mock draft, I'm going to have the 49ers selecting Jalen Pitre, the safety out of Baylor. Jalen is 6 foot tall, 197 pounds. What I really like about him is that he always has a nose for the ball. He always just is near the ball. He's like a magnet for the ball. Someone that he actually kind of reminds me of is, I think it was 2 years ago, Antoine Winfield Jr., who came out of Florida State. That would be a similar comp that I would look at when I look at Jalen Pitre. Now, he's also a guy who really excels against the run. We've seen numerous occasions at Baylor where he's able to just hit the gap in the offensive line, come up with the tackle. He's very physical, makes the tackle, rarely misses. So I really like him being able to make plays in the secondary, which is something that we've been lacking, but also, like we always stress with the 49ers in this defense, is being able to make the tackle and cause those plays for losses. Now, overall, he's a good, solid athlete. I think he kind of sometimes gets by a little bit more on football IQ, which is nothing wrong with that. But because his combine was fairly solid, I think in my eyes, he's probably the number 5 safety in this draft. Of course, you have Kyle Hamilton, number 1. Daxton Hill's up there, Jaquan Brisker, and I think Lewis Seen for Georgia had a phenomenal combine, really fast, electric player. So I think at this point, Petry's probably number 5 for me, but he's a perfect fit for what we do. I think he will take a little bit of time to develop, as any rookies normally take, but bringing back Jaquaski Tart, having Jimmy Ward here, I think that really there's some great veterans to lean on in terms of learning the defense, learning the scheme, and I wouldn't actually be surprised if he ended up becoming a starter maybe halfway through the season. We know Tart usually ends up missing some games here and there, so it's possible that Pitre then steps into the starting role and maybe doesn't relinquish it. Last but not least, what I like about Pitre is he is very versatile. He can play in a lot of different positions. He can play in the box, he can cover, he can do a bunch of other stuff. So I really love this fit for the 49ers. Moving on to our first pick in the third round, which would be 73 overall, I'm going to have tight end Greg Dulcich from UCLA. He's 6'4", 243. This guy has excellent hands, really good body control. He made a number of plays at UCLA down the field on deep passes, which is something that I think we're going to be doing a lot more with Trey Lance at quarterback. So his 40 time was solid at a 4.69, but I think he's one of those guys who just plays faster than that, in terms of, like, when you remember, like, Jerry Rice didn't run a fast 40, but he was just fast on the field, and I think Dulcich is faster on the field. He's a versatile weapon. Again, I think that's a key thing for this offense, for this team, and just the way the NFL is going, is to be able to play multiple positions, so if guys do get banged up, then you can fill in that role, and it just increases your value. So he's versatile. He can play in the backfield, he can play in the slot, he can line up at a more traditional tight end spot, which I like about that. Played for Chip Kelly at UCLA, and Chip, we remember him from a horrible year at the 49ers, but it's an offense that has proven to work, and it's somewhat it's very similar to like an NFL style offense. One thing that he will have to improve on, though, to get into Kyle Shanahan's good favors will be his blocking. He's a willing blocker, but he'll need to bulk up a little bit more. Maybe learn from the the O-line coach, and then like looking at guys like Kittle and Charlie Warner, just the effort put in, that'll earn him more snaps. So overall, I think this would be a great pick in the third round. Someone to alleviate some of the burden that George Kittle takes on at that tight end position. I think it's something that Shanahan would love to do, is to have another guy at tight end who can be a weapon, whether it's down the field, whether it's, making plays. And that's something that Dulcich does. He's good after the catch. So, and that's kind of like a requirement to be a 49er receiver. He's able to make guys miss. He's not the best at breaking tackles, but he can drag guys a few yards. So, and we see Kittle do that all the time. Now, if we move on to the third round, 82nd overall. So this will be our second pick in the third round. We're going to stay on the offensive side of the ball. And one of the guys who's really come on big for me is Calvin Austin the third, the wide receiver from Memphis. Now, he's a relatively small guy. He's 5'9", 162 pounds, so not the biggest guy. But man, this guy is lightning quick. So you look at his time in the combine of 4.3240, which is just insane. Now you couple him with Marquise Valdez-Scantling, MVS, who we signed in free agency, and suddenly this wide receiver room could be up there. You could maybe argue with some of the best in the league. If you look at Debo, Ayuk, Jawan Jennings, MVS, Calvin Austin III, wow, that's just, you have a bit of everything, size, speed, yak ability. It's just crazy to think of the potential from this wide receiver room. And it's someone that, I think MVS could be around for a year or two, but look, if we have Calvin Austin just taking the top off defenses, man, that would be special. He does also have some punt return ability, although he did muff a couple of punts, but maybe if he kind of focuses on that a little bit more initially so he can get on the field a little bit more, show that big time ability, that would be awesome to see. I could also see a number of plays maybe drawn up for him, similar to how we ended up drawing up plays for like Debo and whatnot, where maybe on end arounds, things like that. Maybe you even get him in the backfield. You just never know. But his speed is something that will make defenses have to honor that. So that could very well open up things underneath for Debo, Ayuk, and Kittle to be able to get some good yards on like slants and things of that nature. So, the one thing, though, with his small frame is that it could lead to potential durability concerns. He's a very small guy. We're talking 162 for the NFL that's tiny. So, when you think about, like, the fact that if he gets hit, that's not going to be good for him. A lot of these DBs and these linebackers are fast. They hit strong. They're very physical. So that will be a potential concern. The other thing, too, is that when you have these bigger DBs in the NFL, just would they be able to body him and almost like push him out of plays? So Shanahan will really have to be able to scheme him to get him open, probably put him in motion a lot, things like that. But I think this would be a great pick in the third round, and just again giving that other dimension to the offense, where a lot of teams, when you looked at how the 49ers played last year, I mean, they really only had to guard like the short routes and intermediate routes, but now when you have Trey Lance, you have to start suddenly thinking about all of those plays. Plus, if you bring in MVS and Calvin Austin, you have to think about the deep pass. You have to think about Trey Lance's running ability. It really puts a lot of pressure on opposing defenses. And I think it would be, we could really see just a massive season from the 49ers offense, even as early as 2022. With the third pick in the third round, which would be 93 overall, I'm going to take Martin Emerson Jr., the cornerback out of Mississippi State. Now, he's 6'2", 200 pounds, so he does have that more traditional size for the cover three defense that you saw like in Seattle a lot. But he's a perfect scheme fit. When I think about Martin Emerson, he played tons and tons of zone defense in college. He's incredibly aggressive and physical. So the positives of that is that he is going to be able to make some turnovers, once he develops technique and everything. He's going to be able to force some turnovers. He's also going to force some losses for the opposing offenses in terms of just coming up and making those big plays against the run. You gotta love his ability to tackle. So when teams run to the outside, he's a guy who's not afraid to get in there, and he doesn't miss many tackles. The one thing, though, which that could count against him is being physical, being that aggressive, is that it could lead to a bunch of flags. I wouldn't be surprised early on in his career, maybe the first couple years, if we see a lot of like pass interference or holding calls, just while he develops, gets familiar with our scheme and just develops his technique in the NFL. But overall, I think he'll be a great fit and someone that like he wouldn't be expected to start right away. Now, if we look at this mock, we would have Emmanuel Mosley, we would have Ambry Thomas, K'Wan Williams, Bryce Callahan would all be guys who would be starting for sure ahead of Emerson, so it wouldn't be any pressure for him to come on right away. So you can spend some time, get into the 49ers defensive scheme with just a great staff. We just have a great coaching staff, especially on, defense and offense. In the 4th round, so this would be pick 133 overall, I'm going to take edge rusher Dominique Robinson from Miami of Ohio. So he's 6'5", 256. This guy has come along a big way, and the performance that he had in the combine is a big reason for it. So he's incredibly raw. He was playing wide receiver as recently as 2019 and just converted to edge pass rusher, but he blew up the combine. He basically, graded out in the top half of everything that he tested in, and a lot of them he was actually number 1, number 2, or number 3. So just potential through the roof. Now, of course, we have arguably the best or one of the best defensive line coaches in Chris Kasorik. We also have a bunch of really talented players on the defensive line that he could watch every day in practice. Of course, Bosa. But we also saw how someone like Samson Ebukam came along big time this season, kind of adjusting to a new role. And I think Dominique Robinson, given a year or two in the system, we could really see that athleticism, that length that he has. We could really maximize his potential. And again, he will never be the focal point of opposing offenses, so he will get chances to have those one-on-one opportunities. I think for him, getting in here early, a lot of like preseason action, maybe if we're blowing teams out, he gets some action too. But I think long-term, this is a guy who could develop into something pretty special, actually. So I love the fit here, love the player, love the value, and Dominique Robinson, 4th round, 133 overall. Moving on to the later round picks. Round 5, pick 172 overall, I'm looking at Pierre Strong, the running back from South Dakota State. He's 5'11", 205. This is another guy similar to Calvin Austin, where he had a blazing 40 time, 4.37. Actually, I believe it was the fastest 40 time for running backs in this year's combine. He's an excellent zone scheme fit. That's what they ran at South Dakota State. But one cut runner, but he runs with speed and also power, and he's somewhat elusive. He's not the kind of guy to break a bunch of tackles necessarily, but he's just able to kind of work his way through where he doesn't, like, defenders find it hard to get their hands on him. To me, I kind of think of him as like a faster version of like an Elijah Mitchell, similar size, but that 4.37 speed is just awesome to have. We saw when you had that kind of speed what it could mean in this offense. Like guys like Raheem Mostert, who was undrafted, kind of came out of nowhere with the 49ers. I could potentially see a similar performance out of Pierre Strong in this offense with a good offensive line in front of him. Now, he's a decent receiver, didn't get a ton of opportunities actually to catch the ball in college, so that's something that he'll have to refine a little bit. We tend to see the 49ers pass the ball to running backs a lot more, especially in key situations where it could be third down, we're in shotgun, the running back will flare out. Can they make the catch? With this speed, though, I think he'd be able to beat the linebackers who'd be more likely to be covering him, so that's awesome. But for sure, his pass blocking, that's something that he will have to work on big time if he wants to see a lot of action, especially in those key situations on third, fourth down, and what have you. Round 6, 186 overall, I'm going to be taking the defensive tackle, Haskell Garrett, out of Ohio State. 6'2", 300 pounds. This guy is explosive off the snap. Great off the snap, and he's a gap penetrator. So if he sees like any kind of gap, he's just going to hit that real hard, get in there, and hopefully ruin some plays. To me, he could be potentially a long-term replacement for DJ Jones. I don't think that he would come in and in his rookie year he'd have the kind of performance that DJ Jones has had in recent years. However, I think he's someone that we could develop. Again, we talk about Chris Kasorik. We talk about all the other guys that we have on the defensive line who take up opposing offenses' focus. So I think he could be someone who, good rotational guy initially, maybe 2 years down the road, he could be someone who could be a starter on the defensive line. Excellent motor, you gotta love it. He's a very high effort guy. You know, a lot of times, unfortunately, he will get washed out by double teams, but you can just see that he really tries his best out there on every snap. So that's something that's really underrated in my opinion. But he's never gonna be the anchor guy. He's never gonna be like your Javon Kinlaw. It's gonna take him some time before, you know, he'll have to develop his strength, his technique, but I just don't see him as that, like a Jordan Davis from coming out of Georgia. He's not gonna be that guy, but those guys are relatively rare. Now, if we move on to round 7, we have 3 picks here. These are all compensatory picks. So 253 overall. I'm looking at the offensive tackle from Boston College, Tyler Vrabel. He is 6'5", 310 pounds, the son of the Titans head coach, Mike Vrabel. Excellent scheme fit, very mobile, really athletic, which is really good to have at an offensive tackle position, especially in the offense here where we need our guys to be very mobile and to be running a lot and making those key blocks. But here's the thing, he's definitely a developmental guy, but in the 7th round, that's kind of what you're going to expect. He'll need to improve his strength for sure, and his technique as well. He can definitely get beat by a lot of guys, especially like powerful guys. So that's something that if he works on, he could ultimately be maybe a swing tackle, but especially for sure in 2022, he wouldn't be expected to start. You know, we will have Trent Williams, we'll have Mike McGlinchey at the tackle position. I would imagine should anything happen to either of those guys, we would either plug in Colton McKivitz or we'd have Daniel Brunskill take over. So I can't imagine he'd get many snaps. Probably spends his rookie year on the practice squad, but just if he can, you know, improve his game, you never know with these guys. And we're kind of looking for athletic traits more than anything at this point in the draft. With the 2nd pick in the 7th round, which would be 256 overall, I'm looking at DeMarcus Fields, cornerback from Texas Tech. 6 foot 193, solid size. Played a lot of zone defense at Texas Tech. Excellent tackler too. Rarely misses tackles, and he has a ton of playing experience. He played in over 30 games in college, so that's definitely going to favor him as he is coming into the 49ers with suddenly a pretty deep cornerback room. But yeah, definitely someone who'd be developmental, someone who it'll maybe take him a couple years. But I think we stash him on the practice squad for the first year, and then when we maybe look to move on, or if anyone gets hurt, I think he could ultimately come in and play solidly. I don't think he'd be a complete disaster, even in his rookie year, just considering how much experience he has in college in the Big 12 as well. So in the Big 12, they do love to air out the ball. Last pick, which would actually be Mr. Irrelevant, not only for this draft, but in the actual, not in its mock draft, but in the actual draft itself. So round 7, 263 overall. Darian Butler, the linebacker from Arizona State. He's 5'11", 221. So this is a guy who's a very good athlete and an excellent football IQ. So those are the two things that I love to look at when it comes to later round picks. They know the game, they're an excellent athlete, and they love the game. So I think regardless of anything else, I think those are just the traits that I love to look for in the later rounds. And here's the thing with the 49ers, we've shown that we can develop linebackers. I mean, of course, Fred Warner's developed into one of the best in the league, but Dre Greenlaw's done really well, and he was a 5th round pick out of Arkansas. Azeez Al-Shire, an undrafted pick, developed into a very solid linebacker too. So I think this is excellent value, someone who could eventually take over when maybe when we have to move on from Greenlaw or Al-Shire if we just can't afford to keep all those guys along with Warner. But someone who is yet definitely undersized, who will need to bulk up quite a bit, but he's very physical, and it's one of the things that I talked about, and really loves the game. And I think straight away, if he can make it be on the practice squad, I think he at least has special teams capabilities, so there is value there even in the 7th round. But yeah, that is going to do it for my draft, my mock draft. Let me know what you guys think. So ultimately, I've divided up the Mock Offseason version 3 into 2 parts. It just got so long, so crazy, but I absolutely love doing these. You'll notice I'm wearing a different shirt. That's part 1, because I actually recorded the mock draft on a different day than everything else, just because it got so much, I got so into it, and it's something that I just really love doing. So please give me your thoughts on like the guys I targeted, whether it's free agency, whether it's the draft, guys I re-signed, what have you. If you think that it makes sense, if you disagree, I'd love to hear it. Love to hear your guys' thoughts, and feel free to leave your mock drafts below. I just love getting into it. And it's one of my favorite parts of the off season is just doing like all these mock off seasons and seeing where people's heads are at in terms of prospects, in terms of priorities, in terms of like positions, what have you. But yeah, I'm not going to ramble on anymore. Appreciate all you guys, and the subscriber count's always jumping up, so that's so awesome to see. But yeah, I'm going to leave it there. More videos on the way with off-season talk. And at this point, guys, I'm going to say 2 things. The butt counts. And I'm going to catch y'all on the flip side.